Well, hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back. I hope you guys are doing great out there. I've got an interesting video for you tonight. I want to talk about Alone, Season 8, Episode 4. The name of this episode, I got my notes right here, was Far From Home. This is Alone Grizzly Mountain. This was a good episode. It was a long episode. I watch Alone on Hulu, and this episode was an hour and a half long. So if you haven't seen the show, you haven't seen this episode, I highly recommend that you turn this video off. It will contain tremendous spoilers. The show is to the point where it's starting to get really good. So we're going to start right off the bat with the quote that comes on the screen. This is an interesting one. It says, "Men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds." This was a quote from Franklin D. Roosevelt. Think about that for a minute. You're not a prisoner of fate, but you're a prisoner of your own mind. Just think about that and put that into perspective as far as these 9 contestants that are still left out there at Chilko Lake, and just think about that. That's crazy. So we're going to kick off this episode. It's day 13. We have 9 people left. 8:30 in the morning. We have Teresa, and she's got a ridge line up made out of paracord. She's drying her laundry. She decides she's going to have a cup of tea. It's kind of windy out, and she decides that she's going to spend a little bit of time today working on the shelter. She wants to use bark to shingle the sides, or it's because it's almost like a A-frame almost kind of thing. It's her pit shelter, and she's got these sides, so she wants to take the bark pieces and shingle her shelter. So very smart. She's working on her pit house. And then it moves forward to day 14, about 10 o'clock in the morning. Again, 9 people left, and we're going to be talking about Nate. And there's a good shot of him standing there, and he says something to the effect like, "Here it goes," or something, and then you can see the sun, and he's soaking in the sun's rays. And that does a lot for a person. That really does. It does a lot for your morale. It makes you feel good. And then, there's an annotation that comes on the screen, and it says, "Vitamin D promotes health of bones and teeth. It also supports the immune system." Now, it's been a while since he's had any kind of meat, about 5 days or so. And it's windy outside, and he says that he's having trouble keeping his fishing lines out because the winds are getting real wavy, or the winds are making the water choppy and stuff like that, and it's making the fishing a little bit difficult. One thing that I really like about Nate is he's deciding to address the problem. He's a problem solver. I think that's very smart. So he decides that he wants to build a pier. Very cool. And when temperatures get colder out there, the fish go further into the middle of the lake. They get further into the deeper parts of the lake because the water temperature is a little warmer there. It gets colder near the shore. So for him to say that he wants to put this pier out there and extend his fishing limits, I guess you could call it, that's very, very smart of him to do that. So very cool. And he decides that instead of using a lot of cordage to make his, it's not a tripod, but it's got 4 pieces almost like an A-frame. He's going to use that to put his pier, to put out in the water. And he decides that instead of using cordage, because he doesn't want to waste his paracord, he's going to cut notches and dovetails to notch the pieces of wood together. So hopefully that'll get him away from wasting cordage on his pier. So very, very smart thinking there. And then it talks briefly that he has a wife, he has 5 kids, and if he wins the show, he said he'd like to get a boat and go sailing, if he wins. So we're going to move forward. It's about 2:30. We're still on day 14. Just think about that for a second. 14 days. That's a long time. They're approaching half a month out there. So that's quite a bit of time out there to be struggling. This is why I say earlier that this is the point where the show starts getting good. It starts kind of taking off because you're starting to see a little bit more struggle. People are looking for food a little more, and it gets a little more real. That's why I like this show so much, because the longer the show goes, the more real it gets. You get to really see those true colors of people. So we're talking about Coulter. Again, 9 people left. It's about 2:30, day 14. He shows the boat, and now he's got an outrigger on each side. Very nice job that he did on that boat. And the outriggers, he even used the tarp on the outriggers too, so they're like little boats. It really looks nice, and it looks very stable. And he's happy. His morale is good because of the boat, I'm guessing. And he decides that he wants to take a bath. He calls it a shower, but he really wants to take a bath. It is day 14, so he hasn't had a bath or shower or anything in 14 days. And I noticed that here we're talking about Nate just a second ago. He's going to build a pier, but moving back to Coulter, he has a log that's in the water naturally that extends, I don't know, it probably goes out 20 feet. And he basically dives off of that log into the water. And, he's swimming around and stuff. And then he gets out of the water. Now, he was naked because he was bathing. Well, he gets out of the water and he sees a grizzly bear on the shoreline that sees him. And the grizzly is coming towards him. So think about that for a second. Here you are. You just got out of the water from bathing, because you didn't want to stink anymore. And then you see a grizzly bear and you don't have no clothes on. Oh no, it's kind of scary. Moving forward, we're still talking about Coulter. It's a little after 4:30 now. And he's saying, "Hey bear," and he's naked, like I said. And he's doing everything that I could think of that would be an example of the correct thing to do. He really is. He's talking loud. He's talking assertive. He's, clapping his hands. He's making all these gestures and noises to try to let the bear know very clearly that he is there. So everything is correct. I love his approach. And the bear doesn't care. The grizzly bear is coming closer. He stops for a little bit and he continues to move closer towards Coulter. If I was in that situation, I'd be a basket of nerves. I really would. To have a grizzly bear, and staring at me and walking towards me and I'm screaming at it and not screaming because he's not panicking. He's handling the situation like a champion. He really is. So he decides that he's going to get the bear banger, and he does. He gets the bear banger out. He fires one off, and the bear kind of scurries, and then he stops. The bear stands there for a minute. He just heard this loud banger go off, and then he continues to walk closer to Coulter. This didn't bother the bear. Crazy. So Coulter is continuing to, I guess you would say, increase his demeanor. Like, "Hey bear," He's getting a little louder. He's getting a little more assertive. The bear's getting closer. Then he decides he's going to fire a second bear banger. And the same kind of response. The bear kind of stops for a second. And guess what? The bear continues to move closer to Coulter. And Coulter's like, man, this is getting real. So he fires a third one. Nuts. And then finally the bear goes off into the woods. After 3 bear bangers, the bear finally leaves. And Coulter's like, I'm going to get dressed. That would be scary. It really would. So we're moving forward to about 8 o'clock in the evening. It's still day 14 and we're still talking about Coulter. And he's talking about this bear encounter and how that really made him think. You know, that was really an eye-opener for him at the demeanor of the bear out there. This bear didn't care. And Coulter is a large man, you know, he's a big dude. So, you know, that bear, I mean, I could see the bear having that kind of response if there was a little timid little woman or something real small, you know, 70-pound woman. But Coulter's a bigger dude, and the bear, you know, he's got a beard, and the bear didn't care. So again, it raises Coulter's awareness to how these bears, these grizzlies are going to be. So he decides he's going to treat them with even more respect, which A+, you know, for Coulter for thinking like that. So we're moving forward. It's day 15, about 7, almost 8 o'clock in the morning. We have 9 people left still. We're talking about Jordan. He does not have any fish. And he's talking about he has plenty of smoked trout. And he holds one up to the camera. And man, it looks delicious. It looks very, very good. It looks like trout jerky that you would buy in a store or something. Fantastic. Trout is rich in protein. It has a lot of vitamin B. It's got the omega-3 fatty acids in it. It's just a good source of food. And he says, this fish doesn't need seasoning or anything. So he decides that the goal for him today on day 15, he wants to make a door for his cabin. He wants to make his shelter a little bit more permanent. So he builds this really nice door, you know, a bunch of little small, probably, I don't know, 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch diameter. You know, he's got a lot of these little poles. And he's got a nice little door put together. And it looks nice. And he decided that he was going to make some hinges out of wood. And the way he did that was so smart. He had 2 little boards that he made. And then if you put them up vertically, and then maybe you drill like a hole vertically, that's what he mounted to the shelter. And then on the door, he had these branches that had 90-degree branches coming off of them. And he basically looked like he wired those to the door and made it where they slip down into those holes that are in those vertical holes. I mean, it looked fantastic. Very nice job that he did on that door, those hinges. Very cool. I thought that was really, really cool. And then he decides that he was going to, you know, go a little further on his door, and he wants to make a door latch. So I thought that was cool too. So now he can actually lock his door from the inside, and his shelter's pretty solid. And for a brief moment, the thought crossed my mind of Dick Proenneke. Dick Proenneke went up to, I think it was Alaska, Twin Lakes. At 51 years old, he built a cabin and did all these things. If you haven't seen Dick Proenneke's story, Alone in the Wilderness, you got to check it out. But he did something similar. You know, he built a whole cabin and hinges and everything. Fantastic. So just for a brief moment, you know, that thing with Jordan and that door, it reminded me of Proenneke there at that moment. So much respect to Jordan. I mean, it was very cool. His woodworking skills are fantastic. Shelter is solid shelter. So we're moving forward. Still day 15, a little bit after noon, 9 people left. We're talking about Nate. And he said the weather was calm all night long. So he's thinking that today's going to be a good day to possibly go out and put that pier in. And as he gets out there by the shore of the lake, the wind is starting to pick up a little bit. And he says, you know, this lake is 1,000 feet deep and it's fed by glacier water, so it's cold water lake. Which reminds me of California. When I was a kid, I grew up in Donner Pass. We lived in a small town called Truckee. And there was a lake called Donner Lake. And that lake was snow melt off water. And that lake was a cold water lake. But this lake is way bigger than Donner Lake though. And the annotation says that it's 56 degrees outside and it looks cold. So at about little after noon 50 or so, you know, so almost an hour later, he's carrying out this, it looks like, it's like a swing set. It's got 2 angles like this and a ridge pole, and he's carrying it out and the thing's just kind of falling apart and it ends up being a fail, right? No problem, you know, and that could be frustrating because you're putting all this work in and you're sawing all these board, burning these calories to do this thing, and then to have it all fall apart. But what does Nate do? He keeps it together. His mental showed at that moment because he didn't get all frustrated about it. It might have bothered him, but he's a problem solver. And while he was coming out of the lake, I noticed that he's starting to look thin. And even he himself, if I remember correctly, had mentioned something to that effect, that he saw or felt that himself, you know, he's getting a little thinner. And then he goes back to the shelter and he knows why the thing failed. And he says, I appreciate failure because it's the best way to learn. And that comment that he made just rings a loud bell to me, because I say that a lot to people. I say that I fell my way to success. You know, you don't stop trying. If you fall down 10 times, you get up 11 times. And Nate has that mentality. So I was impressed with his mental at that point. Because, you know, he had just spent all this time working on that thing, and it didn't break him. It didn't, you know, it might have bothered him, but it didn't bring him down. And he decides he's going to move forward. He's going to fix it. So now we're moving forward. It's about 1:45, day 15, 9 people left. We're talking about Teresa. She decides that she's going to go into her shelter, her pit shelter, and she wants to make a raised bed. And I thought that was really smart. So she takes these poles in there and cuts all these slats and makes a really nice looking bed. And she starts to sing a little bit, and she's humming, and she has a beautiful voice. So listening to her sing, that was very nice. You know, it gave us some good television because we got to hear her singing voice. And this is something that I really like about the show, because each person out there, we really get to see their character and to see her sing and to hear her sound. I thought that was cool. So we're moving forward. It's day 16. A little after 7:30 in the morning. We have 9 people still. We're talking about Coulter. And I noticed his shelter looks like a solid shelter. That's the first thing I noticed at his camera shot there. And he said that he was having food dreams at night. And the shelter looks like it has... I just said that the shelter looks solid, but I noticed there's another scene that he shows, you know, and he's talking about that dream where he had dreamt about food and stuff. But then I noticed behind him, it looks like the shelter needs some shoring up, that there's potential for convection or airflow to come in. So that raised awareness for me. And I'm sure that he'll get after it. You know, I'm sure that he'll fix that. So that was the thing about him. And then he decides he wants to make his parents proud. And he's talking about this, and I can guarantee you that he probably is. You know, you're out there doing your thing. How can you not be making your parents proud? So he goes out in his boat, and he's far out there in his boat. I mean, it looks like he's all the way on the other side of the lake, which could be kind of dangerous. And he's going to fish, and it says that he hasn't had meat in like 2 weeks. So I was thinking, wow. So he catches a fish, and he's trying to bring this fish in, and he loses the fish. So let's move forward. We're still on day 16, 11:17 in the afternoon. We're still with 9 people left. We're talking about Coulter, and he's out there in his boat still, and he's still trying to fish. He's been out there for a few hours now trying to catch these fish. He gets another bite. He's reeling in another fish, and he loses the fish. But a good thing happened. As he lost the fish, it fell in the boat. So he got a fish. He's super excited. I'm happy for him. It's a nice little rainbow trout. And he's talking about the boat. He says, I'm going to use this boat a lot. So very, very cool. Let's move forward. We're still on day 16, 1300. So it's a little after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. 9 people left. We're talking about Jordan. He says he's going to make a pipe. And he says something very interesting that kind of caught my attention. He said, I have 2 cameras going in case I cut myself. I thought that's weird to say that. Kind of a weird thing to say. And he's using his multi-tool. He's drilling a hole into a piece of wood. And he's got the piece of wood right on his thigh. And he's like drilling this piece of wood. And I'm sitting there cringing. I'm thinking, man, I hope that thing doesn't slip. And he even mentions that. He says, I hope I don't slip and stab my quad. Then he fixes it, and he gets a piece of wood as a barrier so that if he slips, he's going to hit a piece of wood. So very smart. He corrects it. And then I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Because that's, you know, I don't mind seeing people, you know, tap out or whatever, but when they hurt or they get injured or something, it bothers me. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. So we're still talking about Jordan, and he's using the multi-tool again, and he shows the pipe. It looks nice. And he says he's going to smoke some kick-a-nick-a-nick or whatever that's called. And he's smoking that, and he says, oh, it's not too bad. So we're moving forward. We're still on day 16. Little after 2 o'clock, 9 people left, talking about Nate. He's making sounds to talk to a squirrel. And he says that squirrel comes out there all the time, and they're buddies. And then I guess they're not allowed to hunt the squirrels out there. And that might explain why we're not seeing snares. You know, because I've been this whole time, I mean, we're on day 16, and I haven't seen snares. So maybe that's why. Maybe they had a briefing, you know, that they weren't allowed to do that. Because I know previous seasons of Alone, they weren't allowed to do certain things because of the red tide, you know, in the ocean, stuff like that, when they were in Vancouver. So maybe that's why they're not snaring. So the seas, you know, the waves and stuff on the lake are calming down a little bit, and he decides that he's going to put his pier out there today. So he's on attempt number 2. It's about 4 o'clock now. Again, day 16. And he gets the for the lack of a better term, the swing set piece out there. He gets it out there in the water, and it's nice. It's about 25 feet out there, and he has 3 long poles that he puts out there, and he's got this perfect platform to walk out about 25 feet or so onto this pier. It looks fantastic. So very, very smart thinking on Nate's part, and I could see that as being pretty big potential for him to start catching some fish, you know, or at least gives him the option to be out there Because remember, Zach Fowler did that on season 3. I think it was season 3. So let's move forward. Day 17, a little after 8 in the morning, we have 9 people left. We're going to talk about Rose. She says, I'm not having any success with fishing. She decides to make a fish basket to try to catch fish. So very smart. And I noticed that her shelter, in my opinion, and I'm not knocking her, but observation here, I noticed behind her, I'm looking at her shelter and stuff as she shoots that scene, and I get the thought that she's going to have a cold shelter. It doesn't look like there's any kind of insulation, no boughs or nothing behind her. It's just a tarp behind her. Is she going to fix that? I hope so, because if it gets cold, that you just got a tarp, Of course, that's going to stop wind and stuff, but it's not going to keep the cold out. So just an observation. She decides that she wants to put the fish basket out there in the water. And it's about 11 o'clock in the morning now, and she's putting it out there, but it doesn't, my initial thoughts, like, it needs to be much further out than what it is. I mean, she's only out about 10 feet and puts this thing out. And, I mean, it's barely off the shore. I just don't feel like fish are going to be attracted to come in that far. I think it needs to go much further out, just my opinion. And then we're moving forward. We're talking about Nate now. We're still on day 17, 9 people left. Nate is drinking water out of his Dutch oven. And it's kind of a funny shot. He says, the one good thing about having the mustache is it pre-filters your water. Gets all the large things out because it gets caught and he gets water through his mustache. It's very funny. And which brings me back to another point about Nate. And I can't remember where this scene was, but he's standing there and he's looking at the camera and he goes, guess which way the wind's coming from? And his beard is like bending like this way. And he's like, guess, can anybody guess? And the wind is like tweaking his beard. It's pretty funny. And then he talks about when he gets home that he might trim his beard and, stuff like that. Because he said the only thing wrong with having a mustache or a beard is when you kiss your wife. And I agree. I've had a big beard before too. I agree. So then he decides he's going to go fishing and he has a fish. It's a small rainbow trout. The thing I noticed about Nate, again, even though the fish was kind of small, like 6 or 7 inch fish, he's very thankful for it. And that just is another testament to his mental strength. Because every little thing that happens, he's seeing it as the positive that it is. So I think that's amazing. They say that when you start a long journey, it's not good to think about the long journey ahead. Otherwise, you might never start. So start by putting one foot in front of the other and then just start. And that's the mentality I think that Nate has. Because he catches a small fish and he's like, cool. He's cool with that. So I really like his character. We're moving forward, still on day 17, about 7 o'clock at night. He's cooking the fish. He says, I'm going to eat it all. He's happy. Who wouldn't be? He just had some calories in his body. We're on day 17. He doesn't have to quit when there's a struggle. He's happy. He's ate the fish. And then, he's kind of talking in the background and, like a voiceover kind of thing that they have. And he's talking about, I don't quit when there's a struggle. I'm not a quitter. I like to figure things out. If there's a problem, I'm a solver. And I liked his peer. So we're moving forward. It's day 18, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're talking about Jordan. He just turns the camera on. He gets a bug in the eye. He was just getting ready to talk to the camera. And he decides he's going to put the family initials on the ridge pole of his shelter. He's got a J on the top, a J on the bottom, an O, and an A. And those initials represent his son, his daughter, and his wife, and himself. So I thought that was pretty cool. And he really starts talking about missing his daughter. And then he gets emotional and he shares something that is very private to him. And he says, my daughter was born with a heart defect. She had to go through so many operations and procedures, and she's just been through so much. And he says, I lost my daughter before she even turned 4. Wow, you know. And he said it wasn't all the procedures and all that was hard on him. It was remembering all the good things, all the good times that he had with her that was the most painful for him. He said she was an amazing kid. And I thought that was really neat of him to open up this private part of his life with everybody out there to see. I mean, much respect to Jordan for that. You know, I've got things that are private to me that I would probably let out on the show if I was selected. So I give him respect for putting it out there. He said she was an amazing kid. And he says, I decided that I wanted to share this because this is one of my most private things. And I share this because that kid was magical and I want the world to know that. The world needs to know about her. And I was blown away. Tons of respect. And I even got emotional watching that scene. It was amazing. So we're moving forward. Day 19. 11 in the morning. 9 people left. Talking about Rose. She goes out, checks her fish basket, and there's nothing in it. Remember I said a minute ago that it's only like 10 feet from the shore. And I'm by no means am I knocking her. This is what we can see on our end. There might be footage where she had it 50 feet out there for all we know. All we know is what we can see, what they edited into the show, and what we're seeing is that it was only 10 feet out there. So I'm not saying that she didn't put it out there. She might have, and we're just not seeing it. She's out there looking for berries, and she makes we just had a moment with Jordan where he was getting personal, and he was sharing information. And now we're kind of having that kind of moment with Rose. She says, most of the people in my life have left. She said, my marriage, when the kids moved out, so did my husband, shortly after, I guess. So she says, being alone doesn't bother me. It's nothing new to me. That's a heartfelt moment. For a person like Jordan to put all that private stuff out there about his daughter, and just, we just had this thing with Rose. I give those two tons of respect, for putting their personal stuff out there to the camera for us to see. Much respect. So we're moving forward a little after 2 o'clock, day 19. We're talking about Jordan. It's windy outside. He sees 2 ducks on the water, and the ducks are just bobbing and weaving on those waves. And he says, I bet they're pedaling 100 miles an hour, paddling. And he decides that he wants to go explore the coastline of his area. And he knew the only way to win the show was if he forgot about his wife, his son, and his daughter that passed away. And that was kind of an eye-opener for me. I thought, wow, that's kind of, I really do believe that that's how a person should be if they're going to go out there and win the show. And then the next thing we see, he's talking about his family. And at home, he says, at home, when I'm having a hard time, I can look into the eyes of my wife, I can look into the eyes of my son, and I have that support system right there. People that will help build him back up. He says, out here, I don't have that. So he gets the phone, he calls in, and he taps out on day 19. He says, I'm ready to be with my family. And you can tell that it was a very difficult decision for him to make. It's got to be a hard decision. And then he's okay with it though, And he says something to the effect, you know, if I got hurt, if I lost too much weight, you know, I got an injury, my shelter burned down, or I fell in the water, or something, hypothermia, he says, I could understand people understanding why I tapped out. He says, or why a person would tap out. But I guess he's kind of alluding to people probably don't understand quite why he's tapping out because he misses his family. They might think different of him or something. But I give him tons of credit. You know, it just and the thing that I say about Jordan is he was comfortable putting the truth out there. Like, this is it. This is why I'm quitting, because I miss my family. And his family back home, that's real. You cannot knock a person for keeping it real. You know, there's tons of armchair quarterbacks out there that are watching the show probably being like, why did he quit? What a wimp, you know, what a loser, whatever. That's their opinion, and I hope those people, those naysayers that are going to be negative about this guy tapping out, I hope they keep their thoughts to themselves, because from me, I give Jordan tons of respect. For him to put it out there and just be okay with it, mad respect. He didn't try to sugarcoat it. He didn't try to fake an injury. He didn't, fall down and act like I'm dying. I'm medical pulled. And then a day later he's walking around. No, he owned it. He kept it real. And that's worthy of respect in my opinion. He decides he's, standing by his decision. He says, I didn't think I'd tap because of this. I'm a competitor and I'm competitive and stuff like that. But that's basically the end of the show. So it was kind of frustrating to see Jordan go, but again, much respect to the man for keeping it real. So now we're moving forward. We got 8 people left, and that's the end of that episode. So folks, I want to say thank you for joining me today on this video, Season 8, Episode 4. The show is really starting to get good. One thing that I remember about Jordan is he left with a smile. He didn't leave defeated. He left with all his eggs in the same basket. He's not losing his mind. And he gets to go see his family. So who can't appreciate that, Please leave your comments down below. I'd like to read them. I read every comment because I love seeing what you guys got to say. With all that being said, folks, again, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this episode, my thoughts on this show. I'm doing my best, and I take tons of notes. I write all kinds of things down. Stay tuned to next week's episode. I can't wait to see it. I love you all. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.